Oh, Lauren, Lauren, queen of the screen. With Botox so tight, you look like a dream. But your skin's so thin, it's like tissue paper. One wrong word and poof, you're a vapor. Hey, Lauren, Lauren, toes all sore and red. From folks stepping on them, now you're crying in bed. People are mean, you wail through the night. But you swing at victims' kin, what a sight. From YouTube throne, Queen Lauren's so grand. Now cast to the peasants with pitchforks in hand. You dish out the drama, true crime with flair. But cross your highness, oh beware. Family members grieving, you pounce like a cat. Claws out and hissing, imagine that. Botox can't hide that frown upside down. Your kingdom's crumbling, you're losing your crown. Hey, Lauren, Lauren, toes all sore and red. From folks stepping on them, now you're crying in bed. People are mean, you wail through the night. But you swing at victims' kin, what a sight. From YouTube throne, Queen Lauren's so grand. Now cast to the peasants with pitchforks in hand.
All right, everybody. I hope you guys are all doing so damn good. Why? Well, it's Friday. Woo! All right, there we go. That's our introduction. Hell yeah. It's Friday night. Okay, now then, what do we nerds do on Friday night? Well, of course, we critique other nerds. What could be more fun, right? Okay. What we're going to be critiquing tonight is another John Matthias gem, a hidden gem. And if I must say so myself, I kind of like the double entendre of my title, The Hidden Gems of Matthias Logic. That turned out pretty good, huh? The Hidden Matthias Gems of Logic. There ain't none. Look, here's my contention. My contention is that we have to make a choice here. Either John Matthias always goes with blaming the parents or blaming psychopathology or blaming horrific, crazy ideas, or he just doesn't really have a wide array of knowledge about psychology in general, motivation, things like that, right? See, you kind of have to make a value judgment, all right? So many of the videos that I've done directly in relation to John Matthias has been either APA Code of Ethics and highlighting actual violations that can get you in a lot of trouble with your licensing board, okay? Or I've tried to sort of come in on the backside of some of their videos and offer a more likely scenario, right? Now, of course, we're not diagnosing. We have not a crystal ball. When you are looking at a picture that has many holes in it, the best that you can do is make an argument about what might be happening in the picture. And, I do try, when I do this in relation to true crime, I do try to offer 2 or 3 potential theories. And what are the theories of psychology or the research that would back up those 2 to 3 conceptual ideas, right? Because I'm really, really aware of the fact that we don't have all the information. If I am contracted by a judge to go into a jail or go into a hospital and do a full psych evaluation, answering some of these questions, then I have the freedom to meet with that person as much as I want to meet with them, within reason, obviously. And I have at my disposal, at my fingertips, I can gather any kind of historical archival data that I want to get. I can get school records, which very often will give us information related to like socialization in school. You can talk to family members. Like you can collect any manner of archival information or historical information that then will feed your overall picture as for what may have been driving this person to do the things they did. One of my biggest complaints that I have against John Matthias, the largest complaint that I have, of course, is all the ethical problems. But the second largest is the way that Lauren doesn't have an education herself. And that's fine. Unless you're going to use that education for career education just for the sake of having a college degree is probably not wise in today's world where it is so, tuition is so expensive. But I think what bothers me so badly about Lauren is how she uses the fact that she was on real TV, or that she's a journalist, not just like a little lowly YouTuber like myself. She uses those titles, or she uses those types of positions to set herself apart from others, to elevate herself in what is really consistent with what somebody with narcissistic personality disorder likes to do. They like to feel like they are special. They like to feel like they are more and they are better than others. And that's just complete and total nonsense, right? Everybody in the world has to work. Sometimes we get lucky enough to get paid for our work. But how about the case of like when I was a stay-at-home mom? When I was a stay-at-home mom, that was the best years of my life. I absolutely adored being with both of my kids when up until the age of about 3 or 4 years old. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. I think the government should subsidize families to allow all moms to stay home with their little babies. I think that would make for a healthier populace. But in no way does someone who makes money or doesn't make money, in no way are they better or have greater worth in our society. It's just not real. And so she uses these labels like real journalist to elevate herself and say, I'm better than the rest of you. And you can track all that back, to childhood. And we're not going to do all that because that would be a tangent. Now then, what we are going to talk about is we're going to talk about John Matthias and his exploitation of the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner. Now, the reason I call it exploitation is because they just made one video after another about this story in a way that they don't make with others, right? Let's see. Maury said, Lauren's degree is in mass communication. She may have had some journalism classes, but she didn't go to journalism school, which covers ethics, law, etc. Thank you, Maury. And she's not a psychologist, right? She even though she plays one on YouTube, she isn't. And I don't think that in any way, shape, form, or fashion had she the type of experience that you usually see with a coach who is reputable. Like I have some coaches that they do not call themselves life coaches. One of them is a business coach. Um, one of them, one of them is a health coach. And these are people that like the business coach that I do referrals to for my patient, for some of my patients, clients. Um, she is a woman who worked like 64 years in business. She attained the highest levels of success in her field. And what she likes to do now, although she's like officially retired, of course, people that are used to working all the time, we don't ever really retire. We just sort of modify our lives so we have more freedom, right? And that's kind of what she's done. And so as a mover and shaker, a top performer in her field in Houston for decades, when she retired, she started her business. And so when I have people, young people who are trying to be more successful in their careers, or they're trying to get a job, anything that would be related to performance, having to do with vocational or professional work, while I am working related to mental health, behavioral interventions to increase physical health, things like that, I make the referral to the business coach, who then meets with them and basically teaches them how to land a good job and how to keep a good job, how to make, how to do speeches in front of large groups of people. She does an awful lot of work with female-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses, bringing those people together and helping them network and make contacts and grow one another's businesses. So she's not a life coach. She's an adjunct, and she herself is bringing expertise to the table. And so my patients benefit not only from the mental health information, but they benefit completely from the association with professionalism and how to be in the business world and be a success in the business world, right? I don't think that that's what, I don't know what Lauren's expertise would be. And yet we know that during a period of time, John had Lauren working as a life coach, and they were doing some kind of creepy, like the teen wilderness camps that I just sort of automatically think child abuse. Like, I don't know that I've ever heard of one that wasn't abusive, because they take this military model and they use corporal punishment. It's all based on behavioral principles of punishment and reward. And, that's something that I'm expert in. And I'm going to tell you straight up, punishment is very effective, but in a very limited number of situations. And you actually really want to avoid punishment at all cost. You want to use reinforcement and reward for any sort of behavior modification, behavior change. And that is with humans, that's with animals, pets, working horses. What you always want to go with reinforcement and reward, and you really want to, punishment is something that it just creates more problems than it helps. So it's best just stay away from it all the way around, right? But that's not the way these wilderness camps work. They work first and foremost on punishment. And then once they've sufficiently punished these young people, then they start throwing breadcrumbs of reinforcement. And I'm sorry, but they just have it completely backwards. It's just wrong. For example, I had the good fortune of working for a little while with, the college was teaching a gorilla how to use sign language and also how to use a computer type of assistive language device. And so I got to do that. Great fortune in my life. Loved it. Absolutely would do it again. Um, and if you tried to use those same tactics of punishment with the gorilla that was trying to learn to speak, right? You would run a real risk of getting hurt because the level of frustration that those tactics create is counterproductive. At some point, the stress on the animal, whether it's a human or a gorilla or a little dog, at some point, the stress on the animal outweighs their natural inclination to please or their natural desire for that reward. And you basically just burn up the motivation of the animal that you're working with. So you start out with reward and reinforcement and you stay with reward and reinforcement. About the only punishment that would ever be used would be ignoring, turning your back on bad behavior, not giving it any additional energy. So I was horrified when I found out that John Matthias was doing this work with these wilderness teen retreats or I don't know, concentration camps. Okay. I was pretty horrified by that. I would like to think that people that are working as psychologists, I would like to think that they at least know behaviorism, like at its most basic level, right? That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that they are ethical people, and I am hoping that they at least know and understand the concepts of behaviorism. I have a very hard time believing that an ethical, well-informed psychologist would ever willingly get involved with one of these wilderness camps for troubled teens. And the fact that the one that he started had to do with young boys addicted to pornography, it's fairly horrifying. So I was shocked with that, completely and totally in shock. I felt that same revulsion when I began watching their coverage of the Nick Reiner case. Because the you okay? All right, thank you. Because he fell back on blaming others. He went the more I guess clickbaity route of explanation instead of the most obvious route of explanation. And so that is where I'm going to pick up with today's video. Now, this video that I'm reviewing that they did, the title of this video is "The Shame That Fractured the Reiner Family." Now, how is that for clickbait? Right? So you have a man and a woman, loving parents by every explanation, friends, co-workers, even Nick's own friends, other teenagers, they all said the same thing. Rob and Michelle were committed to Nick. They weren't playing a game. They didn't act like the other wealthy parents with drivers coming and picking the kid up from rehab. they were there. They came to the meetings for their child. They were committed to helping their kid. And yet, John Matthias, a psychologist, chooses the title, The Shame That Fractured the Reiner Family. Kind of gross, isn't it? So that's where we're going to start. All right. Now, he is right now talking about the parents of Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner, the dead guy, the one whose child killed not only himself, but also his beloved wife. Okay. But listen to what John is talking about. Listen to what he chooses to discuss.
Near the beginning, or at least
let me make sure this. Yeah, y'all, it's added. Okay, sorry about that, y'all.
This is during a period of Rob's career when he's starting to make larger movies. His career is really starting to take off, and so he says this in 1986, and then years later, this is an interview that Rob did with Fresh Air, NPR's Fresh Air, Terry Gross. He said, quote, "I felt that my father didn't love me or understand me."
I'm sorry, y'all. Rob is the dead man. He's the one that got murdered. Why are we now dissecting his relationship with his father? And that not only was Rob struggling in his relationship with his son, a diagnosed schizophrenic, why is he now analyzing the relationship between Rob and his father and basically throwing shade at Rob Reiner's dad? Basically saying his dad wasn't a good father, that Rob Reiner was damaged because he had a terrible father. John, you have to stop this. It's not okay. Occam's razor. There is another explanation that is simple and direct and probably the right one. Why do we have to invent intergenerational trauma, abuse? Here's the deal, John Matthias. You're in effect, with the way you approached your argument, you're basically pointing the finger at Rob Reiner and saying that he abused Nick, that his dad abused him, and then Nick turned around, and then Rob turned around and abused Nick, and Nick had to kill his dad. That is your argument. It's the de facto argument. You may not be actually outright voicing that, but that's the impression that you're giving to people that may not have a solid background in what it is that you're addressing. You're blaming everybody else except the guy with the knife. And that does tend to be your calling card. Every time your wife puts up, forensic psychologist analyzes killer, it's always the same old story. The killer can't be held responsible. We're going to say they had a bad parent. It was the bad parent's fault.
And the point,
and that was just now. That was recent.
Right. It was just recent.
Wow.
So you have this snapshot from 1986 to 2016 to 2025, where Rob is basically reiterating these same themes over and over again. And what's important here, I think, is not only the fact that these issues aren't resolved, right? That the sense that Rob feels compelled to talk about these over a period of 40 years, roughly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was also a known uber liberal. He was the penultimate liberal, right? and people that are of a more liberal persuasion, they have a lot of interest in mental health. They're very, very interested in understanding themselves as well as understanding other people. He himself, Rob, admits to basically being in therapy nonstop. Okay, you don't get that from let's say Donald Trump. Donald Trump's not sitting there talking about how he's in therapy all the time and he wants to understand his motivations, or he wants to understand the motivations of his children. That isn't something that is so notably tied to people that would identify more as conservative. I'm not saying not that there's not anyone. There certainly are. I'm talking about the fact that Rob Reiner was as far left as you could possibly be. And we, in the field of psychology, liberals are dominating the field. There's a great deal of interest in being mentally stable and healthy and what makes us tick, and we do it. That's what we do. So the fact that the penultimate liberal Rob Reiner is always in therapy doesn't exactly surprise me, John. And it doesn't surprise me that a Hollywood family, and I don't mean any family, I mean a very, very successful Hollywood family, that they are all interested in motivation and attachment and why people do what they do. It doesn't surprise me. It fits with what I know about our field. And I'm a little worried that it surprises you, that you act as if you have stumbled upon, you've had this grand epiphany. It's not an epiphany. It's a very simple little theory to explain it all without blaming anyone.
40 years, right? And the other thing I know about Rob, so Rob in 2016, he does an interview with Howard Stern. He and Nick do an interview with Howard Stern. And there's a joke that Howard Stern says something like, "It seems like you've been in a lot of therapy." And Rob is kind of playfully says to Howard Stern, "Well, the only time I'm not in therapy is when I'm not doing things like this."
Okay, now I don't know why he's laughing. I don't think that qualifies as really a joke. I mean, maybe, but I think he was just saying it's self-exploration is a normal part of my life. It is what I do. And I got this kid who's really suffering. And so we do a lot of therapy, family therapy with him. So we're doing it all the time. That's not funny. Why is he laughing? And why is she smiling? She seems like she is very relaxed, if you know what I mean. Not relaxed, not really relaxed. She seems very relaxed.
Rob basically says, "Look, when I'm not working and I'm not talking to people like you, Howard, and I'm not promoting movies or making movies, I'm in therapy all the time."
All the
right?
time.
So this is a guy, Rob Reiner, this is a guy who obviously is very invested in his mental health. He's very invested in becoming healthier.
Right.
And yet, here you have Rob Reiner from 1986, and I'm sure there's more. I've looked at quite a few of these interviews with Rob, but 1986 to 2025, where essentially he's reiterating the same theme. And so what I want to pick up on here, what's important here, sure, not feeling loved and understood is really important, but this idea of...
Okay, so somehow we've decided that Rob Reiner did not feel loved and understood by his father. Y'all got that?
Not being seen.
Oh, he wasn't
so
seen
important.
either.
I think
he was invisible.
If we want to understand this case, we have to start with this idea.
Rob Reiner, the star of the century, felt unseen, right, y'all? Is that right? The guy who made Stand By Me and 50 other top-notch films felt unseen.
Idea of not being seen. And the reason we have to start with that is because the idea of being seen has a lot to do with shame. Shame is the
Now
emotion.
we're getting into the title. The shame that fractured the Reiner family. Are y'all keeping up? Now, we're not really altogether sure how we got to, well, Rob Reiner didn't feel seen. He didn't feel heard. And when you don't feel seen or heard, you have deep shame. I'm sorry. Is it just me or am I simple-minded? Rob Reiner didn't feel heard. How many movies did he have that were the absolute top of the field? You think this man didn't feel heard? This man could talk to anyone and they would stop what they were doing to listen. John, I don't get it. I'm sorry. I don't understand why you are compelled to take a terrible story of a young man with mental illness who gets washed away, overcome in his emotion, and he acts out. And unfortunately, when he acted out in a violent rage, 2 people ended up dead. Why, John, are you invested in making this the fault of Rob Reiner and his father? Why are we going to tear down this entire family and give them all the label of shame? That's what I don't understand.
Essentially, of feeling like you're not being seen. Shame is the emotion of feeling defective, feeling
Crazy.
flawed, feeling judged by other people. It is
Wild.
very much a visceral emotion. It's a self-conscious emotion. It has to do with how we feel about ourselves. Shame, actually, when it's profound and deep, it tends to organize all of our perceptions around ourself and our self-worth, around how we see other people, around love and our acceptance of love, and around failure even. And so if you dig deep enough and you really listen to what Rob Reiner is saying, and you see these slices in time of him saying essentially, I didn't feel seen. I think what really stands out to me is this is a story about shame. And not only is this a story—
No, this is a story about Eric Erickson. This is a story about development, and that young people always feel at some point that they haven't done enough, or they're not being heard, or that they need to do more. They're learning to be productive, or they learn that they're ineffective. You know the Ericksonian model, but you just completely ignore that in favor of this nonsense that the murder victims, Robin and his wife, that the murder victims abused Nick because Rob himself was abused by his father. That's what you choose to highlight and teach the hidden potatoes on your channel. Instead of going with Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation tends to be the right one.
Story about shame, which we're going to unpack today. But
He's gonna
it's a
unpack
story
it,
about,
people.
so there's a family systems theorist. His name is Murray Bowen.
Murray Bowen.
Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
He developed this theory of
Yeah.
family systems called Bowenian, not surprisingly, Bowenian family systems therapy.
Mm.
And Bowen has this, we're going to talk about a couple of Bowen's main ideas, but 2 of them are, one of them is called what he called the multi-generational transmission process. And that's pretty much what it sounds like, which is that generations tend to, unresolved emotional issues tend to get transmitted across generations. So in other words, shame would be an emotion, if not resolved in one generation, would be passed subtly or not so subtly to the next generation.
Okay, I'm not going to argue with you about that. You're exactly right. But aren't you referring to things like abuse? Aren't you referring to things like sexual abuse that doesn't get talked about in the family, and so it gets recreated multi-generational and when somebody finally stands up and said, no more, we're not going to do this anymore, then the family can heal? Isn't that what we're talking about? Are we really going to veer into counseling psychology and just ignore career development information, John? Really? Is that what you're going to do? Why? Clicks and views. Because abuse, IPV, that is a lot more likely to get your YouTube clicks than something boring like counseling psychology and career development, right?
And I think the way shame shows up in the Reiner family has to do with legacy. It has to do with legacy pressure and legacy expectations, right? That's really where this comes into play.
Blah,
So,
blah,
I mean,
blah.
I think there's other subtler ways where it comes into play, but I just read this quote where Rob said that he wanted to be just like his dad, right? That's an idealization.
Right.
That has to do with legacy. That has to do with creating an idealization of what his father had done and how successful.
What you're listening to now that you may not recognize because of the topic, you just listen to word salad. He's just saying things that he thinks sounds good, and there's not a theory that is going to support what he just said. He's babbling. That's what he's doing. He's made his case for shame in the Reiner family system. He's even invoked the name of Bowen's family system, my God. But that's not what this is about at all. What he stumbles upon isn't it at all.
Successfully was and wanting to live up to it. So you have this legacy pressure, I think, in the Reiner family that's constant.
Absolutely.
And if you go back and look, and I said this earlier, if you go back and look at, so Rob was the eldest of 3 kids. He has a sister, Annie, and a brother, Lucas. Both are artists. His mother,
now we're going to throw
Estelle,
them under the bus too.
Was an actress and a singer. And then in the Reiner family, the one we're talking about, Nick wanted to be a writer and maybe an actor or maybe a comedian. And then you have Romy. Romy is in the entertainment business. She's gotten into acting. And then you have Jake. Jake has gotten into acting and writing. All of these people across 2 generations, all of the Reiners across 2 generations are in the entertainment business.
Oh,
right?
my
Think about
gosh.
that for a minute.
We better listen to him say that again, because he is very excited. This must be very profound. Everybody paying attention? If you're paying attention, put your favorite emoji in the chat. He's about to say something incredibly profound.
Across 2 generations, all of the Reiners
2 generations.
across 2 generations are in the entertainment business.
Oh my God.
Right? Think about that for a minute.
I don't know if I can, John. That is a tough one. 2 generations of entertainers. That's supposed to knock your socks off, people. Or not. If you remember your education, it's not going to knock your socks off at all. What he's actually talking about is called career foreclosure or career exploration foreclosure. It is one of the best known theories in counseling psychology. It's really simplistic stuff. It's not hard stuff. I don't know why we're turning 3 generations of Reiners into abusers. I don't understand why we're taking this uber professional, uber accomplished family in the United States cultural milieu and why we are turning them into Shameful failures. I don't know why we're doing that. I don't know why he's doing this. My mind is blown. What he is actually talking about, and I don't know if does he not know this? Like, is he unaware of the information? I can't imagine that. I cannot imagine a single person ending up with a PhD in psychology that didn't learn about career development and more specifically career exploration foreclosure. Of course he knows that. It's on every licensing exam ever administered to PhDs. It doesn't make any sense. It's like going and getting a PhD in psychology and not learning about behaviorism or not knowing who B.F. Skinner is. So did he wantonly say, I don't want to talk about something boring like career development. We want to talk about something that's either sexy or gory or horrifying. Hopefully it'll be something horrifying. Hopefully we can come up with another sicko like Lori Vallow. That's what we really need to get those clicks and views. I mean, was Lauren pushing John to do this? You just need to ignore the boring information coming out of developmental psychology. Don't talk about developmental psychology. I want to talk about something with lots of tears and lots of blood. Don't you dare bring up career development, for God's sake. Our listeners will fall asleep if you do that. Is that the way it went? I have no idea. But any of those, from where I'm sitting, any of those potentialities is more desirable than the in-your-face reality of he just doesn't know this. He erred on the side of, the weight of shame, the destruction of the reputation of a successful family with two parents who every single person said loved their child. They loved Nick. They were worried about Nick, and they did not just give lip service to it. They were devoted and dedicated. No matter what kind of abuse Nick dished out, no matter how bad it got, they never abandoned him, even when they were being told to abandon him by therapists. They said, we cannot do that. We are not going to do that. And they refused. But what does John Matthias do? He has a series of videos on the murders of Rob and Michelle, where it's all about how they died because they were abusive and his dad was abusive before him. There's not a single bit of evidence saying that. But it's sexier than career development talk, right? So when we talk specifically about career foreclosure, it's basically it's a term that describes making a choice about a profession prematurely. And when I say prematurely, I mean like before you give that young person time to explore like different paths of education and different types of jobs, the kind of people that you would be working with in those types of jobs, the kind of settings you might choose from any given job. Or, and here's a big important part of career counseling and career counseling psychology, is knowing what your own personal interests are and getting them to align with the job demands for whatever job that you may choose. And so in career foreclosure, what's happening is the parents or grandparents, their careers are familiar to the young person, correct? It's familiar to the young person, and so they can see themselves in that role. They can see themselves in that career. And yes, it's true. Some parents are a little more forceful than others about, well, I'm a doctor, and therefore you should be a doctor. I have connections, and you will benefit from those connections. So I do think it's fair to say you see that. You see engineers tend to have kids who become engineers. Teachers tend to have kids who become teachers. Even professional athletes tend to have children who become professional athletes, right? We've all seen it. We know it's a real thing. So most kids that are in late adolescence, they are in like an identity foreclosure status, right? They're trying to make decisions that will guide them towards some career path. Interestingly enough, research coming out of counseling psychology shows that student athletes have a statistically significant higher level of identity foreclosure than compared to like any other college student out there. They see themselves on one track, right? They've had a great deal of success. If they're playing college sports, they've seen themselves, they've had a lot of success as elementary age, middle school, junior high, high school. They've had a lot of success in their sport. And so they know a lot about it. They've spent a lot of time practicing. They've had a lot of success, and all that athletic identity gets really well formed. And that they say, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a professional, football, basketball, whatever they happen to play. When those kids fail to excel after college, that they don't do as well professionally as they once thought that they would, they crash and burn. There's a high rate of dissatisfaction in what they've done, and many of them will sit back and really, really grieve, like, why didn't I explore other careers? Why did I automatically say I'm an athlete? That's my only choice, is to go, with a professional, try to be a professional athlete. And, thankfully with professional athletics, most of those players are not going to they're not going to play very long before physically their aging kind of gets them out of the pool, and they have enough time that they can go back to college and then fully explore career possibilities. But if you look from the other direction, what you end up seeing is athletes where they were very successful, they tend to know what to train their children to do, don't they? They tend to know what it takes for a kid to navigate and go through high school ball, college ball, professional ball. That parent's already done that. And they have specialized knowledge that other parents don't have. And so they can train their young kids how to navigate that effectively. So we see a lot of previous pro players whose children go on to also play in the pros. But if you're just a really gifted kid and dad was a high school math teacher, and mom was a nurse at the local hospital, your parents don't know how to navigate that world of professional athletics. They don't know what you need to do. You don't benefit from their connections or their tacit knowledge. And so even though there may be a kid that could compete at a professional level, if they don't really have that secondary level of knowledge or influence that a professional parent or a professional athletic parent can give them, then they may very well choose to do something like become an engineer or an accountant. But if dad or mom were professional athletes, they know how to play the game. They know how to navigate the system, right? Another area that mimics or parallels this problem of identity or career foreclosure is medicine. Doctors. Becoming a medical doctor is usually in our culture, it's usually looked at as sort of an unattainable career. That it's you got to be too smart, the work is too hard, the hours are too long, and you kind of, a lot of people that are definitely smart enough to become surgeons or physicians, they abandon that in favor of something that they more reliably see themselves being successful at. But again, if we turn that around and we look at parents who are physicians, parents that are surgeons, then if they have a child who shows promise, who has that high level of intellectual ability, then that physician or surgeon parent knows how to navigate the system, knows what's going to be required, knows what's coming up next, and they can provide their child an extra layer of education that is more likely to keep them in that career track and also for them to be successful, graduate, and have a good career. Okay. So those are two very specific career paths that we see a high level of foreclosure, and the kid is matching what the parent did. But it's not because they're being shamed into it, John. It's not because there's abuse. It's just good old-fashioned knowledge. It's just awareness. It's the parent knowing and understanding what skills the child is going to need, and so then they cultivate them. They're not trying to hurt their kids, John. I would say with Rob Reiner and his family, they would be up there with these highly accomplished people like surgeons and professional athletes. That yes, they're a multi-generational family of artists, entertainers, performers. Sure, I can accept that, but I'm not getting your part for how they're all filled with shame and that it was abusive, that all the kids chose to follow in the footsteps of their very successful, very accomplished dad, mom, grandfather, and grandmother. All four of them were entertained. You say entertainers, but there were far more than entertainers. They're artists in multiple fields. They're brilliant people. They're not entertainers. Okay. So maybe all of the children and grandchildren, maybe they go on to choose the entertainment industry. They go on to choose things like writing and performing because they have natural talent just as a genetic endowment from their very talented parents. But maybe they go on to choose that because of the specialized knowledge that dad and mom and grandpa and grandma had, the connections that they had in Hollywood. I can say all day long, I want to be a ballerina. If I don't know anything about being a ballerina, I'm not likely to be successful, am I? But if you have a dad or a mom who's an engineer, and you say, I'd like to be an engineer, now you got a dad or mom that can coach you through the process. So healthy, notice what I'm saying, John. Healthy career development favors exploration first, and then commitment. And commitment we associate with achievement status, okay? Yes, it's true, family input is valuable and it's often well-intentioned. And sometimes, because of the success of the parent, the kid is in a position that even if they are in a state of foreclosure, they're still going to enjoy success because they have an additional level of knowledge that other kids that don't have parents who are surgeons, or they don't have parents who are professional football players, or they don't have parents who have written best in the world screenplays consistently for 30 years. The Reiner children were given a gift. They were given an opportunity just by merit of who their parents and their grandparents are. They enjoyed a genetic endowment of talent coupled with the experiences that their parents and grandparents bring to the table with which to guide them and coach them through the process. And that, in fact, is what Rob Reiner was in the process of doing with Nick, wasn't it? Nick wanted to write a book, and then he modified it into a movie. And Rob was taking him by the hand, much like an apprentice, and walking him through the process. This is how a movie is made. This is how we do it. Here are your contacts. Here are the people in the industry that will be willing to help you. He was in the process of providing that scaffolding. You ever heard of that, John Matthias? Scaffolding. We're talking about cognitive psychology now, learning, okay? Rob was in the process of providing scaffolding for Nick so that he could learn how to take his writings, turn them into screenplays that would then be modified and turned into a movie. The same thing his father did, the same thing he had enjoyed 30, 40 years of great success doing for himself. That's what you're looking at with the Reiner family, John. You are not looking at a family torn asunder by shame. You are looking at a family that followed a very predictable, normal path of identity exploration and, yes, some foreclosure. It also formed identity achievement, the additional layer of knowledge to provide to your kids as they're learning their way. Why in the world would you want to tear this family down and make Rob Reiner some kind of abuser? The young man is suffering from severe mental illness. That's the story. This is not a story of shame. You don't get to rob this family of their history, the reality of the family. You don't get to do that. Just so you can make some more money on YouTube, you don't get to do that. This was a family that was rocked by mental illness in the worst way imaginable. That's the story. You don't get to turn Michelle and Rob Reiner into terrible parents. You don't get to do that for clicks and views. You don't get to do that. It's a career development issue that you used and named it shame. No, it wasn't. seems like to me that, you were absent the day your class was learning about counseling psychology. I don't really have any other way of describing otherwise. All right? Okay, everybody. Listen, it is Friday night. Y'all need to go have some fun, even if it's fun on the tubes. All right? I'm going to be walking the streets of Utopia tonight. I'll see y'all somewhere. Talk to you later. Bye. I thought I was going to talk to you later.
Lauren, queen
Here
of
we
the
go.
screen. With
Hit the
both
thumbs
arms
up.
so tight, you look
Please
like a
subscribe
dream, but your skin
and
so
share
thin,
this
it's
video
like
all you want.
tissue
Alrighty?
paper. One
See you
wrong
later.
word and
Bye.
poof, you're a vapor. Hey, Lauren, toes all sore and red from folks stepping on them. Now you're crying in bed. People are mean, you wail through the night, but you swing at victims' kin. What a sight from YouTube throne. Queen Lauren's so grand. Now cast to the peasants with pictures.